Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Creativity Connects with Mikki Wilson, a creative collective podcast where we go beyond the business and spotlight the real stories, creative sparks, and human moments that shape the women behind the work. I am Mikki, your host and a fellow Creative Collective team member. I am also the founder of Dot Connector Consulting. People call me the Dot Connector because I love bringing women together, creating space for connection, and helping build collaborative relationships and partnerships that move your work forward with intention. Creative Collective is a business support program for small businesses and creators. We provide tools, community, and strategy to help people do meaningful work in sustainable ways. Today, I am looking forward to this conversation with somebody I've been connected to for a while and really looking forward to learning even more. Robyn Burns. And Robyn Burns, what you don't know, is someone who's redefining what access and equity look like in real time. So, Robyn, welcome to the podcast. I'm so happy to have you here today.
Yeah, likewise. Yeah, I'm really excited.
Good.
I think it was, summer of 2020 that we first connected, and it was just like to see where you've gone and the Dot Connector journey, and I guess the work I was doing was come night and day since where we are right now too. So
I was going to say too, the work that you're doing with the Salem Pantry, I remember that moment because I believe in divine timing and timing being everything. But I was so interested in what you were doing. You were interested in what I was doing. And for whatever reason, I think we were both on kind of this like growth track in this evolution because the Salem Pantry has grown so much. What you're doing, I can't wait to dive into what has led you to do so much. But all the expansion and growth really since 2020 in these last 5 years between both of us has been amazing.
Yeah.
So shout out to us.
Yeah.
You know?
All right.
I love this. So I'm going to tell the listeners a little bit about you, and then they're really going to get to know you through the conversation we have. Okay. So listeners, I want you to know that Robyn Burns is the executive director of the Salem Pantry, which is a nonprofit organization committed to transforming food access here on the North Shore in Massachusetts. With a background in journalism, public policy, and community engagement, Robyn brings a unique blend of storytelling, systems thinking, and people-centered leadership to her role. She's helping lead a movement, my friends, not just a mission. So today, I really want to dig deeper and talk about the human behind the story, behind the strategy, and behind the systems change. So with that said, I'm going to bring us into a segment that I like to do with every guest, and it's called Connect the Dots. And I find that this really gives our listeners and our watchers the nitty-gritty of the who, the how, the why that leads up to the what we do, right? So, Robyn, give me one person, one place, and one thing that unexpectedly shaped your creativity or how you show up in the work that you do.
Yeah. If it's okay, I'm going to take a different order on that, actually.
Absolutely.
I'm going to go place first.
Oh, I like this.
Yeah, mix it up. I'm going to go with Pittsburgh. So I grew up in eastern Pennsylvania, small town. Was really looking to move to either Philadelphia or Pittsburgh for college. And I feel like the move to Pittsburgh was so crucial for me, in part because even though, and thank you for your nice words earlier, even though a lot of folks know me from the food access work or the community work, I actually did a lot of work in filmmaking and DJing and was more steeped in what I didn't realize was the creative community, but very clearly to me now was a creative community during and after college. And I feel like the way of being or mindset that carries through for me now really was somewhat, had its origins at that time. And so, yeah, I really think that was a instrumental place. And I've been in Boston area now for almost 2 decades, but look back so fondly for not just the memories, but I feel like really I can appreciate a lot of what I was getting into, kind of getting me towards where I am now.
I love this.
Yeah. And then let's see. I'll go thing or moment. I'm gonna go COVID, which I know is, nowadays feels like forever ago, but was really, a moment for me. I had just stepped into the role of executive director at the Salem Pantry, and I thought I was joining this small organization looking for a first full-time ED with really modest aims for growth. And then, boom, worldwide pandemic, food security right on the headlines of every publication and form of media initially. And it was a real moment of, immersing myself into that reality, learning, growing, trying things, iterating, messing up, and all the things. And so it was very transformational. And then I think I'm actually going to go with my Aunt Jean. She is somebody who I've really come to appreciate since COVID, and not that I didn't love or appreciate her before, but she is the one person in my extended family who has extensive experience working in the nonprofit world, helping run organizations and programs and consulting, and I've really just come to learn from her, and she's made a lot of great connections for me, and just someone who I just really have grown to appreciate, and somebody who I feel like prior to that big moment in 2020 was somebody who I hadn't realized how much untapped connection and relationship potential that I had there in my extended family, and someone who's also been there for me and supported me in lots of different ways.
Oh, so important, right? Yeah, support is a theme that I feel like comes up constantly in my work, but like, who are the people around us that influence how we lead, who gives us support, and all those things. So I love this. I love how you differentiated between aunt and aunt. I had a mother that said Bath. I happen to say Bath, and so I feel like the A thing in the Northeast is a thing. We have people that say it both ways.
Yeah,
When you
usually
said that, I could hear my mother in my head.
actually, it's a little subconscious coming in. I usually say aunt, kind of like bagel, but I feel like I always say it incorrectly. So I'm like, little podcast edit for myself there.
Oh, I love it. My mother would say that is like the luxury version of, you have your aunt, but then when your aunt comes to town. So I used to love that little inflection she made. You brought like a core memory back for me. I also love that the place is Pittsburgh. You don't know this, but there's always connections that come up for me. I actually have to go to Pittsburgh next year for a convention, so I will be tapping into you for some places I can visit when I'm in town. And little known fact about me, I actually went to Temple University in Philadelphia for just under a couple of years before, tuition raised and we come back home and we figure it out. But I love that the roots start in Pittsburgh. Even though you've been here for a couple of decades, we have that nod to Aunt Jean, because role modeling is really important too. And so how you noted that she was very involved in nonprofits and kind of set those impressions as well. And thank you for giving us COVID was a whole moment. Let's talk about COVID for a second. But COVID was a whole moment because I think that I didn't realize, Robyn, that you may have mentioned this at the time, but I feel like I was new to my business pretty much too at the time, since we had just started in 2019 and went into this whole moment. I don't think I realized that this was like a newer role for you in the organization, and at such a pivotal time. Really all the challenges we were all faced with, but honestly, when you're getting a new job as an executive director and this is the challenge you're faced with, it's like, oh wow, well, okay, thanks. So thank you. And then also I wanted to touch on the creative part, the filmmaking and all the other things that make you, that again, just inform your creativity and how you approach things. I've learned from anyone who does filmmaking or photography, their eye and perspective for things is something to be really respected, because you really are seeing through a different lens than somebody that doesn't have that background as well too. So I always find the perspectives of filmmakers, photographers, videographers unique, because they look at things through a tool that gives them a perspective as well too. So just all these little neat pieces about you that I'm learning today. See, we're connected, but I'm learning even more. You are awesome, and thank you for playing Connect the Dots with us. I really am going to get some prizes on the outside of the door when you walk out.
Prizes?
Because
Okay.
yeah, but I'm going to drop yours off to you personally because you played the game and I love this. This is a new little ad for me, but I really think it gives some contextual, some context around the lived experience that really starts to shape where we're going.
Absolutely.
So with that said, we've learned a little bit now about who is Robyn. Not just the executive director, but the person behind business in general. What do you want people to understand? Is there something you want people to understand about the you in all of this?
Yeah, great question. I think it's interesting. My family. I live here I live in Salem here in the North Shore, with my wife and a 13-year-old. And as I've been doing this work, immersed in community and a lot of partnerships and collaborations, I get made fun of a lot by my family, just in terms of we'll go out and about and like I'll, run into Mayor Pangalo and be like, oh, hey, look, she's going to go over and talk to the mayor now. Oh, okay, we'll just wait over here. So it is just kind of a funny running joke. But I think behind all of that, one of the things I've really learned to embrace is my vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
And really, I think that's something that might not be something I show very often. However, I've also learned that as someone who is leading a team or working collaboratively in a community and with partnerships with other organizations, that vulnerability is so important, and it really helps to, one, be authentic, but also it just helps, I think, break things down in a way that makes things a lot more palatable and approachable and ultimately, hopefully, more successful. So yeah, I think something like, being as real as I can, as cliche as that sounds, that's a real important thing for me around, my being and who I am. And and I think it's, a large part of some of the accomplishments that we've made both at the Salem Pantry and then, personally over the past number of years.
Yeah. Look, I find that, or as the kids say, keeping it real, right? But being you, it's something that's so easy to say, but it's really hard for a lot of people to do for various reasons, from the stories that live in our heads to society to all the things. But I just love the realness. Well, no pun intended here. I love the realness of the answer, just being real and being you when you're out and about, because I find when people do that, it attracts the right energy, but also keeps you connected to the things that you're doing. And hey, I hear you when it comes to family saying like, oh God, anytime, I think when we do the community work that we do, when you're out, it is this like, oh my gosh, you can talk to this person because I've been there. It's like takes me an hour to leave networking events because you want to, those talking points are so important. You never know what's going to come up in conversations. But I love the advice of just being authentically you, but just being real. And I think listeners, for you all, that means like different things, but like the things that you like to show up and talk about or do or any of that, like don't be afraid to do those, because I think it doesn't serve us when we're trying to be some kind of curated version of ourselves that's hard to maintain. So I love this. I love when simplicity is a superpower and it's just like, I just try to be real. And I'm like, so simple, but very complex.
Yes,
layers
absolutely.
to that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Robyn, how did this path toward food justice and leadership in community begin? Was it gradual, or was there a clear pivot point or a moment where you were like, this is the work, this is the purpose, this is the alignment?
Yeah, that's I've actually joked about this, somewhat of an origin story of sorts around this kind of food journey. As I was wrapping up my schooling in Pittsburgh and my film studies degree, and was pretty engaged in environmental issues. This was 2000. I think we're kind of 2001, 2000. I think we're kind of the same age here. 46
Yes.
represent. Yeah.
Yes.
And I was becoming politically aware, socially aware, getting really tapped into what was going on then in the Pittsburgh and Western Pennsylvania area. And I just so happened right after graduating, I was hanging out with a friend who worked at a local, natural food store. This was back when those kind of existed. I think now they've kind of had a hard time surviving in the Whole Foods kind of bigger world now. However, he was telling me about this organic farm north of the city, and he was kind of telling me this great story and how the farmer came in and he was looking for extra help, and he just needed some folks to help finish the farm season. And so I was newly free in terms of not having as many responsibilities, and so I was like, yeah, I think I'm in. And then my friend reached out, and then we ended up driving up there like about an hour north of where we lived for the rest of the farm season, twice a week. And then at some point during the year, I realized, I was like, oh, you know what? I think my friend asked me and told me about this because he doesn't have a car, and I did. And then I realized that in part, my whole kind of getting into the food side of things happened because my only having a bike riding friend needed a way to get to the place. And so I was somewhat manipulated in a lovely way. But then, honestly, that kind of got me tapped into food production. It got me tapped into running markets in the city. And I soon actually became really infatuated with an organization based in Boston, the Food Project. And I went to grad school, did some work around community food systems, and I applied to work at the Food Project in 2005, and not having ever been to Boston before.
Wow.
And I, long story short, got the job and then moved up here and worked there for about 10 years in Roxbury, Dorchester, and then also in Lynn. And it was a really amazing part of the journey. So I feel like it kind of started with a little bit of some curiosity, and then really ramped up for me, and really felt like since that time of moving up here in 2005, I've always done something around food, community, education, growing, distribution, something along those lines around like food access, food security, food sovereignty, food justice. A lot of terminology is often used these days, but it all, I think, applies, and it's definitely a passion, and it's all rooted around people and collaboration and partnership.
I love that. And you know what I love about purpose? When you are meant to do something, I feel like I witnessed this enough now. I can just say, when you are meant to do something, it is funny how that thing will come and find you, whether you know you're meant to do it or not. So I love that it's like a bike riding friend that really needed a consistent ride that led you into this journey. But here you are, right? So sometimes it's that blessing in disguise, or our friends that somehow become an angel in the story at the end of the day, does this thing. And I'll share a story with you because the reason I just love that share about if it wasn't for this friend making the ask, but then finding out why essentially probably made the ask, it's such a real and cute, funny story to me, because when people are like, how'd you come up with the dot connector? And I'm like, yeah, his name's Lance, and he teaches instructional design. And I was complaining about why does everybody come to me to solve their problems? It's not even the same problems, just all these problems, from the helicopter being in the sky to all the things. And he just looks at me and he's like, well, Mikki, it's because you're the dot connector. And I was just like, I don't know what that is, but I like it. Keep telling me more, Lance. And he was like, you're a social node in this network. And I was just like, all right, dot connector. And that's it. And you're talking 15 years ago.
Yeah.
No clue. When I told, how are you going to make money connecting dots? What's connecting the dots and everything? But now I see everybody says it, oh, I connected the dots to this thing. And I'm just like, oh, that Lance, I should probably give him a commission check someday, right? But meanwhile, I'm just like, yeah, it happens at an alumni meeting. And Lance was just like, you're the dot connector. And it's just so simple.
There you go.
With your friend, he asked for a ride, and here we are, changing so many lives. And food insecurity. I love that you also pointed out different terms, because I think the terminology around this is evolving too. So thank you for pointing that out, because I know food insecurity. I think we all listener, from the audience listening to you and I, we all know people touched by food insecurity or access or these different things too. And I think just kudos to your leadership, again, in the story that shapes up to this, because we're evolving. The world's changing, and the way we approach things is so important. And I think language is important too. So I just love how you're doing that. We were meant to be connected because, again, all of our pathways. I'm just like, you know what? It wasn't meant for us to. It was meant for us to connect in 2020. But I think the growth that we've had too is. I love this trajectory that we're on together.
Yeah. And Temple was my number 2 when I was looking at. Yeah, it was either Philly Temple, University of Pittsburgh.
I love it.
Yeah.
I know my people. I know my people. Between the community engagement, the education, and everything that you're doing, I'm just like, these are my people, and I love it. Let's dig into the why a little bit. Why does this work feel so personal to you?
Mm-hmm.
I'm interested in knowing what drives you beyond the Salem Pantry's mission statement to keep pushing for equity and access, whether it's for Salem Pantry or any other area. Between life and business.
Yeah, I think, interesting you mentioned talking about food insecurity, food security. We talked a little bit about COVID. I think one of the really, powerful byproducts of particularly the early part of COVID was food security became a household term. Mm-hmm. It felt like prior to COVID, it was somewhat more of a jargony term that would have been used by folks kind of in the work or more kind of academic. And, I think in many ways, because the idea of food insecurity either did or got really close to impacting so many people, including many for the first time during that part of COVID, I think, in some ways, I think there was a much more nuanced understanding of what that is and what being food insecure can be for somebody. And I think the general public had a better understanding of what that was, either through their newly lived experience or just being more connected to that happening. And I think, in many ways, even though so many amazing things happened around partnerships and funding and ideas that helped address the food insecurity happening in 2020, 21, 22, et cetera, right now, given the current moment, in 2025, it feels like we're kind of getting closer to that in many ways in terms of people being really impacted by what's going on. And so as dark as it feels right now, sometimes I am hopeful that a lot of that, again, positivity that came out as a byproduct from what everyone went through during COVID around the collaborations and the better understanding and systems that were developed around food. I'm hoping that we can lean into that to help us right now. But more broadly, when I was doing that work at the Food Project, it was all. I started as working in the soil, and so urban soil, growing on reclaimed property in Roxbury and Dorchester, turned into urban farms, then moving up to Lynn and doing the same thing in 3 different locations in Lynn. And, something about doing that work in community with neighbors, some of whom would be community gardeners on the same plot, young people from that community and neighboring communities working together all to kind of achieve this goal of, one, just re-envisioning and revitalizing the land, but then also food production. And like, how amazing can it be for us to grow food in a space? And it's not only delicious, but, so tactile and rewarding. And, even the idea of, weeding a bed of carrots, you start out and it's so tangible when you're done. You can look back and appreciate. And I think so much societally, not to get too big picture here, but so much societally in our day-to-days, including for myself, is, things that it doesn't feel like I've moved the needle on a lot, even though I might have spent a lot of time on something. And so to have these really, hands-on experiential opportunities to be a part of myself and to coordinate and learn from others that are joining in. Yeah, I think it's always been something I've focused on. So now I'm on the other side where I'm partnering with farmers to then be able to distribute in unique ways to folks who are then hoping to get more food for their homes. And so, yeah, it's interesting. I've had a few different parts of the journey, but I think food is definitely food and community. There's two through lines. And I think, it's probably a much deeper conversation, probably could be its own podcast series, but the power of food as a connector is, I feel like whether it's learning about people and cultures, whether it's about, creating spaces where exchange of ideas can happen, that's rooted back into marketplaces, going back in history. And it's a basic need, obviously, but there's so much power in food as well that I feel like is so important. And often when I think about, the state of the world and things, sometimes I just wish there could be like the power of just people coming together over food. It's so simplistic, and there's so many systemic barriers right now to it get in our way. But sometimes when I kind of have to pause and remember why I'm into this work, it's really back to the root of food, pun intended. Yeah.
Okay, I love that we 5 years later are figuring out what the potential collaboration could be between us, because you bring up some really, I love why this work is so personal to you and the layers that you're seeing it from kind of the big picture stuff down to the grassroots. But what really excited me is even the last thing you said is how food how food can be a connector, right? And it's even bigger than the access or the security around it, but how honestly doing the work, whether you're on the receiving end of the plate and eating the food, but how it brings us ultimately back together. And so, yeah, food in community, food is a connector, and all these things too. And I will share with you because I agree with you. There is something happening in the chaos of everything right now. And I see people, women in particular, having to make a lot of decisions. Things are more expensive. It's harder to access things in general. We could have a million examples, but even food. But accessing healthy food becomes a decision.
Yeah.
And especially if you have a family and children, and making sure they're fed. And I always say that the root of my work really is in circular economics, because I know when I can work and help women become profitable, elevate and amplify their value, that visibility, their voice, I know that profitability, I know exactly where it goes. It goes into their home and their family, especially their children. It goes into education. It goes into the community, the nonprofits. It goes into the marketplace. Women are the number one drivers of, I don't want to say of consumption, but like we make the buying decisions. We have the purchasing power. And so seeing women win and being profitable, especially right now, is so important, because I just don't think any woman should have to choose between how you feed your child, how are you going to feed? Where's the next meal coming from? In feeding them, but then also as I don't have children, I tell people I'm a party of one. You're looking at a solopreneur that lives on her own and has to just manage her own household. But I find as a business owner, making decisions I didn't have to make a couple of years ago, 5 years ago, and it's really like, all right, I want healthy food. But at the same time, my budget looks a lot different, right? Yeah. And yeah, it's just it's so funny. But food being the connector, but also we need to have these important conversations and together around food, because I know business owners that are figuring out, maybe saying how to get their next meal is too extreme, or maybe it's not, but they're actively thinking like, how am I going to take clients out for coffee, right? How am I going to do the dinners and everything, and being creative around that? And then just generally, I'll say from my childhood, because, I saw it really in college, but the access to food, the security, the insecurity, I just remember right before or around 2020, the college food pantries popping up everywhere. And I will say, when I was a college student, I don't know if it was food insecurity or just like budgeting problems because I always ran out of my allotted budget for the food. So there could be that. But I did see this popping up. And even in my own university I graduated from, I was like, what is this problem? Like, in addition to all the other problems, like this is a thing too. So I just wanted to say, when we weaved through the who, the how, and the why, but when you really centered back on the big point I heard is that food ultimately brings us together and we have to do the work together.
Yeah,
what I
absolutely.
heard.
And yeah, there's, one of the pieces of work that I've been fortunate to be a part of is the Hunger Free Campus Coalition, which is a statewide organization. A lot of great folks in there, including Senator Joan Lovely from here up in the North Shore, has played a real key role in advancing this statewide. And I know the coalition was really excited to get $500,000 of funding in this year's state budget to address this issue, which is one of those ones that I feel like most of the people that aren't tapped into campus, that don't talk to students right now, I don't have one in their lives, don't realize the hard decisions that are being made. It's sometimes, books over food or over a meal.
Right.
Or a lot of folks, commuters that are sleeping in their car to make things work because they're trying to advance that idea of making it through their 2 or 4 year university or whatever it might be. And the campus hunger is a real thing, and so one of the pieces at the Salem Pantry we've been doing is working collaboratively with Salem State University, and we have a mobile truck pulls right up on campus, right outside of the Student Center. We have all kinds of varieties of food, and folks can just come up and access if they want. If not, it'll be here next week. And trying to destigmatize the whole situation is a big part of it too.
Yeah. Oh my God. Gone are the days. I mean, I don't know if they're still doing this, but gone are the days where we're collecting all the cans out of our pantries and bringing them to school, right? And whether that still if that happens, great, because I know there is clear structure around it, but it's just great to see the evolution to now it's really like, you have a food truck basically.
Yeah.
Pulling up.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
it really does destigmatize it because what is so different about the food truck that pulls up that allows you to have access to great food versus the food truck that you could pay for to have great food if you have access to that, right? And that's fortunate. So I love this. So the point being that food brings us together and we have to do the work together really underscores that community is more important than ever. And I think especially for women and creatives who are leading with impact and purpose right now. So I'm just curious, Robyn, what is being part of a community like Creative Collective, for example? What does that mean to you?
Yeah, being a part of the community like the Creative Collective, and I think I'll wager a guess that there's not that many communities that are like the Creative Collective.
I'd like
Very
to think
unique.
we're unique.
Yeah, very unique group of people, organizations, entrepreneurs, etc. I really appreciate obviously the innovation, the ideas that emerge, kind of like this series here between you and Creative Collective and Peabody TV. I appreciate you. I'm somebody who you were joking before about circling the room for an hour when maybe it's time to go. I'm often drawn towards that. I'm usually drawn towards folks with really unique perspectives and people perhaps with whether it's different ways of thinking than I, or people that'll kind of challenge some of my thinking, even if it's just not actively like in a confrontational way, but just having me pause and get curious.
Yeah.
And I find that when I spend time, whether it's with John or whether it's with folks at a coffee connection or any other kind of programming, it's very rewarding in that sense. And I find like that my cup gets full, if you will, at events like this. And so, and I think it's a great opportunity for nonprofits, the business community, whether it's creatives that are solo entrepreneurs or working that hustle by themselves, or small businesses. It's a great opportunity that levels the playing field for us all to kind of come together and exchange ideas. And then there's people behind the scenes that are doing that connector work that help to see things maybe that the others don't see in a way in the space, to then help make connections, probe around ideas, and then hopefully kind of building an even stronger community.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, we do. We try to do it all together. And yeah, shout out to the Creative Collective because I like to say that it's, well, much like us back in 2020. I know what it is, but it is to me an evolution of the type of business support and programming that we need going into the future as well. And again, you pointed it out, creating a space for people so that they don't feel alone
Yeah.
and they can have a place that fills their cup where they're seen and heard and all of that too. So, Robyn, thank you. I could go on forever. I want to give you the last word. Do you have any parting thoughts? And I'm going to include all the info in the show notes, but any last words, final thoughts, and where can people connect with you?
Yeah. I don't have much else to add. This has been amazing. Thanks, Mikki, for welcoming me in and inviting me to be part of the podcast. In addition to the work at the Salem Pantry, I'm pretty active with the Salem Food Policy Council. And, there's a lot of efforts around community engagement and trying to really be a listening voice to what is happening and what the community is feeling like is needed. And interestingly enough, Salem Food Policy Council, Lynn Food Policy Council are the two on the North Shore doing work, engaging community. And so just, excited there's a lot of great work going on all over the North Shore. So yeah, I feel like I look forward to staying connected, and I think I'll leave it at that.
I love it. Oh my God. Robyn, thank you so much. I will be sure to include in the notes where everybody can find you. And just thank you for the conversation today. And look, 5 years later after our initial connection, well, listeners, we're going to be talking about collaboration after this. So you'll hear more from Robyn and I in the future. But that's a wrap. That's a wrap, my friends, for this episode of Creativity Connects. A big thank you to my friend Robyn Burns for sharing not just her leadership journey, but the passion, the creativity, and the personal insight behind it. This podcast is brought to you by Creative Collective, a business support program for small businesses and creators doing meaningful, mission-driven work. Purpose-driven, should I say. If you'd like to connect with Robyn and support the work of the Salem Pantry, check out those show notes for all the links and resources. And as I always say, if something in this episode has struck a chord with you, please share it. These are the stories that remind us how impact really happens. And it's as simple as one person, one purpose, and one community at a time. So until the next time we meet, I am Mikki Wilson, your dot connector, and this is Creativity Connects.